Now we're going to look at our second topic, managing feelings. Now, children have already looked at managing their feelings as part of the conflict management in the videos relating to getting on and falling out. But of course, there's a lot of other feelings that we need to learn to deal with. And that's what this section is about. Now, it's divided into three parts, all of which contribute to us developing the ability to manage feelings. Firstly, we look at ways that learners can recognise, name and share feelings, which is the first step in learning to manage them. Understanding how feelings operate is a crucial part of managing them too. We looked at a little bit of neuroscience and knowing how feelings link to thoughts and behaviour, because these actually give us quite a range of strategies for dealing with feelings. And then we move on to look specifically at strategies for dealing with stress and anxiety. This is rather a lovely clip if you're able to watch this one. It's only a few seconds, but it shows that managing feelings isn't just about managing uncomfortable feelings, it's also about managing our feelings of excitement and our more pleasant, if you like, feelings. It's a lovely little clip to use as a starter for any age, really. This time the links in this topic relate to What Matters Statement 2, which is those concerned with developing an awareness of feelings and strategies which help children to self-regulate, which of course includes talking about them. The same in SEAL, we have understanding and managing feelings across the primary and the first part of this section is recognising, naming and sharing feelings. It's really important that students do develop an emotional vocabulary. We sometimes, I think, assume that they have the words to describe how they're feeling, but it's actually quite tricky, even as an adult sometimes, to recognise the feeling and give it a name. Very often, students, even at secondary level, have kind of, well, I feel okay, or I feel mad, or I feel angry, and that's kind of it, So it means they can't share how they're really feeling. And it also means that they can't understand that other people might share that feeling and feel the same as them, and that it's possible to shift and manage that particular feeling with strategies. Educationalist Dan Hughes, a favourite of mine, tells us to name it, to tame it, which I particularly like. There's lots of ideas in the materials for extending children's emotional vocabulary. And here we've got posters that young people have made. These are both from a secondary context, and Wordles, of course, which are great fun to make, and lots of tools online for doing that. The role of body language and understanding how people are feeling is emphasised right from the beginning of the materials, and lots of activities for younger children, lots of games and starters and so on to help them to focus on body language. And of course the posters that we've looked at, the whole school materials that we looked at earlier on, drawing children's attention to not just understanding their own body language and the role that it has in recognising their feelings, but that of others too. This clip of Catherine Tate, though, is one of my favourite ever, I think. Absolutely perfect for this Year 7 activity, Teenagers from Hell, which encourages them to look at body language and what it tells us about how people are feeling. It's well worth watching and sharing if you're able to. It is a bit long, it's about 4 minutes long, but it's very funny, and I think most children upper primary and secondary would enjoy it. This quiz uses the characters from Inside Out, which, if you haven't seen it, is 100% worth watching. Great for using with younger or older children, and a really good introduction to what feelings look like and feel like inside and out. And this is a quiz where they're given certain clues and they have to guess the feeling. It's quite fun. I love this topic for managing feelings, because there's just so much out there to build on the materials within the and achieve the learning outcomes that are within the SEAL materials. And Sesame Street for younger children is a great resource. The link on this slide will take you to a whole range of videos here. You can see some of them expressing feelings with words, Muppet feelings, exploring big feelings, naming feelings, some lovely songs about feelings which children can learn, and a whole range of stuff that all young children can relate to. So that's a really good resource there. There's also this series of resources from the BBC. These focus on one particular feeling, what it looks like, what it feels like, how you might describe it, and of course strategies for. And again, many ways for keeping the learning alive with this one, things that you can do every single day in school to make sure that this focus on managing feelings is kept up. The check-in is an obvious one. There's lots and lots of ways that schools have to ensure that children check in. The apple tree there for an early years setting, I think that's a nursery, where the children place their picture where they feel on the tree. If they're feeling a bit low, they press it low down. They place it low down, and if they're feeling great, they can pop it up at the top. So the shorter ones might need a little bit of help. The second picture there is from the secondary context, where children make a little image that they then have Velcro on, and they can place anywhere on the kind of ladder of feelings that they've created. And one thing in this particular school that I was involved with is great, is that the children could see where other children were placing their badge, if you like, and they started going up to them and saying, "Are you okay? You know, do you want to chat or whatever?" So it was lovely to increase children's empathy for each other and their kind of helping behaviours. And of course, you know, you can find ways to do check-ins right the way across the age ranges, which is great. There's a kind of year 1, year 2 idea in the third picture there. So really important having a check-in, and here's why. Our emotional state affects our motivation and our ability to learn. I think we all know that. It affects our ability to process, recall, link information with what we already know. And it seems that our working memory, if we're worrying about a feeling that we've got, or if we've got a feeling kind of churning away in the back of our mind, this affects our ability to learn, in particular our working memory. And I call that emotional static sort of going on in the back. And of course, it's the same for children. So just taking that time to tune in and label how we're feeling, and even better, to share how we're feeling with another person, an adult, or children can do it for each other within a safe group, of course, leaves us actually with more mental capacity to learn. So it's a really important tool in our feeling management to help children to develop that skill, but also to use it with adults, and we'll have a little go at that at the end of the session. So for younger children, we've talked about this in the whole school tools, but the feeling fan's really helpful, and particularly for those who could have a personalised version, those who really struggle with their feelings, to kind of show how they're feeling rather than hit out or whatever their kind of default position is. And at older children, the same principle can be used. They can make a key ring or an age-appropriate tool that they'd be happy to kind of use to support them in managing, noticing, naming and managing their feelings. So the second part of managing feelings is really about, you know, understanding where they come from and how we can manage them from a kind of neuroscience point of view, and also how feelings, thoughts and behaviour are linked. So the neuroscience of emotion, although it sounds quite complicated, is actually introduced in a simple way from the very beginning. In our year 4 materials, the idea of fight or flight is introduced, the changes that happen in our brain and they're described as leading to us having only two options, the fight or the flight. We can stay and fight, or we can run away. And it's explained that this kind of shuts down the thinking part of the brain. Some lovely activities around this in the materials, a range of situations are outlined or introduced, and the children are invited to come up with a fight response, a flight response, or a thinking response, and examine the consequences of those. The physical responses to these changes in the brain, when we experience fear, for example, are explored, and again, lots of lovely activities for that. Early on, the children, I think it's in the blue set, the children are encouraged to draw around each other's bodies and then kind of label all the different things that happen in different areas of the body, including the thoughts they might be having, the feelings, and the physical sensations, so the pounding heart, the muscles tensing, and so on. The exploration of what happens in our brains and our bodies is developed throughout the age range, and in the secondary materials used to explain this idea of stress. So lots of in the Learning About Me materials, not surprisingly, a number of activities in year 7, 8 and 9, which explore really what stress is and what we can do about it. There's a stress continuum that's outlined, and lots of activities. There's one here about the stress city, which is quite fun, and children, learners seem to enjoy. One of the ways I enjoy most to demonstrate the bodily changes that we found is through watching animal responses to when they get a shock, or when they're a little bit wary about something. So, and that of course is fun too. So if you're able to, this is a lovely video. The link is there in the on the slide, and sharing that with the children you work with, whatever age they are, can really show those kind of physical responses and the speed at which the brain puts those into action. So as well as the neuroscience, the SEAL materials introduce the ideas underpinning cognitive behavioural approaches. So put simply, this is that behaviour, thoughts and feelings are all interlinked, so each influences the others. So this is the idea that our feelings are often sparked by our thoughts, and of course what follows is that we can change our feelings by changing the way that we are thinking. So I rather like this picture here of the two little girls, and exactly the same situation is giving rise to two very different feelings for the two sisters here. If you ask children why they're obviously feeling quite differently, you can probably see that from the body language, it becomes apparent that it's the thoughts of each of the children that's giving rise to the different feelings. So in the one case, I don't want to look like my little sister, so I'm unhappy. And in the other case, I want to look the same as my big sister, giving rise to a happy feeling. So it's a really simple explanation and example of that cognitive behavioural approach. Now in year, the activities continue throughout the primary resources, and this one I particularly like in the secondary resources, which is the catastrophe consequences game in year 8. And this really draws attention to that kind of cognitive behavioural approach. So they play it as consequences, folding the paper over. There's a situation that is given, the problem at the top, and then each that's passed around so that somebody writes down a catastrophizing, a worst case scenario, the next person does a realistic scenario, and then the third person does an over optimistic one. And this demonstrates, when they're shared, how our thinking can can give rise to very different feelings in response to the same situation. Now we're going to look at the final section in this part, which is developing strategies for dealing with our worries and anxieties. So a kind of summary of where we are so far is that we are able to in order to help us to manage feelings, we need to be able to recognise and to name the feeling, name it to tame it. Then understanding what's going on in the brain and how it links to thoughts and behaviours can give rise to some good strategies, which we'll have a look at. Absolutely crucial and emphasised throughout the materials is this need to know and recognise these early signs of strong feelings so we can spot them and catch it early. We know from working with anger, that if we leave it too late, our brain shuts down that thinking part, and it's quite hard to reconnect that because if we don't manage to reconnect it, we're only left with that fight or flight, which we see, of course, so often in schools and know from our own experiences. And then we look at some strategies for dealing with feelings, some 6-second chills, some relaxation, visualization, and an application of the cognitive behavioural strategy in the old worry ward. So we're going to have a little look at those now. The catching it early, the emotional barometer is in the whole school tools is very useful for that, or you can make a kind of stressometer, get the children to make their own stressometer so that they can really kind of track that feeling and know if it's going. Sometimes, of course, it goes from 0 to 10 in a matter of nanoseconds, but again, you can kind of demonstrate that using these tools. In year 5, children are encouraged to draw an anxiety body map. We talked earlier about earlier on in the materials, children are encouraged to draw around each other. In year 5, there's a kind of body map which allows them to really focus on those signs of anxiety in particular. The 6-second chills. Now, this is really good. I find these really helpful because neurologically speaking, what the research suggests is that when our thinking brain starts to go offline, sometimes we say it's been hijacked by a strong feeling or emotion, an emotional hijack or a snap attack, as my children call them. If we can distract ourselves for 6 seconds, we are less likely to go with that kind of fight or flight, those fight or flight responses. And these are just some lovely ideas with thanks, as it says at the bottom, to coping skills for kids, for just, using something, anything, to get past that initial 6 seconds. So in the secondary materials, these are called 6-second chills. And there's some lovely ideas there, counting backwards from 100 at the appropriate level, squeezing something, getting cold water, drinking that slowly. That's the one I use. Trying to remember the words to a song that you particularly like. And of course, our old standard, taking deep breaths. And these things, they do really work. They need to be practiced when we're calm, not when we're angry. But once we've practiced them and learnt them, they can become our default position. So very helpful idea, the 6-second chills. Relaxation strategies, again, are introduced very early on. And there's a lovely video of the Dingle Dangle Scarecrow and the link there. There's another link on the slide there to a National Health Guided Relaxation, which is also quite nice. Visualizations introduced in year 3, and again we've been recommended this falling leaves visualization to build on the ones that are in the materials, which you can read out to the children and use straight away wherever you are. Rather like this idea. Now, this is actually an application of the kind of cognitive behavioural things. It's like, what do you do when you have a worry? This is presented to Year 6s as a cure from the past, and they're given a number of situations that or they can come up with situations that they try it out on, if you like. So it's quite nice. It's things like things that show the worry isn't true, like last time things were okay. This isn't true because, so you think of all the reasons why it isn't true. And of course, this is really rare that would happen. If you're going on a plane, it's very rare. In fact, I think it's more likely that you get kicked to death by a donkey, isn't it, than die in an air crash. But we still worry about it. So sometimes using our thoughts can help us to overcome those worries. So that's an early application of the cognitive behavioural approaches. Reframing thoughts, and again, this has its origins in the cognitive behavioural approaches, because if we think differently, our feelings will be different. So children are encouraged to think about, through Key Stage 2 and Key Stage 3 materials, how could we think differently about this? He's an idiot, he overtook my dad so dangerously. Get the children to think about, well, why might he have done that? Because he's an idiot. Might be because he was rushing his child to hospital because they'd broken their leg. We don't know. So, thinking about it will make it different. So there's a few examples there that are taken from the materials. Masses out there, again, for dealing with worries and stress, and sometimes it's just helpful to have some picked out for you. So we've got a couple here that we are sharing with you. The Huge Bag of Worries, of course, massively popular text for a while now, but a lot of this story and a lot of others you can find read aloud on the internet, often by the authors themselves, which is quite nice. And on the SEAL community website, we've pulled together some of the ways that teachers have kind of developed these and the materials they've put together. And we've got some lovely monsters there of the worries on spoons, which can be used in class, and some good examples of those. In Crab Lane Primary, the children made worry dolls after listening to the story, the Anthony Brown story, Silly Billy, and they found that Billy found it easier to share his worries with worry dolls. So then they worked in pairs with the worry dolls that they'd made. You can see these are from Lollipop Sticks, and they'd take on the role of either Billy or the worry doll. And they actually filmed their conversations, and the link there is to the school website where you can see some of the conversations that they filmed. So again, just sharing some ideas, the way that practitioners have developed some of the ideas in the materials. These are some examples here for primary children. Ruby finds a worry. That's quite a nice one that's read aloud, and following the link there, and an oracy lesson pack from Tower Hamlets there too. For secondary students, there are a number of really good videos explaining how stress and anxiety work, building on the ideas from the materials, and developing the activities. This one is an example that we particularly liked, introduces an idea called the worry tree, and that one can be found on YouTube. And they're only 2.5 minutes, but really good to share with young people so that they know they're there. So in terms of keeping the learning alive, again, lots and lots of things that schools do to, maintain the learning and make sure that the kind of key concepts that are taught in the explicit SEL or health and wellbeing sessions are used throughout the school day and beyond. So worry boxes and worry monsters, very popular in primary schools, and often they're linked to special one-to-one time with the teacher. So sometimes it's called bubble time for things that children don't want to share, say in circle time or in group work. They can have an outlet for their worries and know that they will be dealt with. And some lovely fun ways. There's some lovely worry monsters you can buy on the net too. Key part of managing feelings for all of us, children and adults alike, is knowing when we need help. So all settings need to make available a range of information, helplines and so on, and to their parents as well, of course, at the appropriate level. So there's so much out there, but this is just a sample of some of the ones that have been recommended to us. But of course, always have a strategy for updating those and making sure they're current. So finally, the activity that we'd ask you to engage with as a kind of pause for reflection and application is to have a look at these pictures here and choose the one that best reflects how you feel. So this is an opportunity to check in really, but at an adult level. If you are in a group, you can share why you've chosen the picture you have as much as you feel comfortable. And I think two things to think about here. One is that always, whenever we do a check-in with adults or children, we need to make sure that everybody knows that they can pass if they'd like to, and they only need to share, if at all, at the level at which they feel comfortable. And the other thing I think to think about is whether this is something that might actually be useful in staff meetings or other meetings that we have with adults. It's a good reminder, I think, that health and well-being and social and emotional learning is for everybody, not just for the children. Thank you.